Okay, this is part 5 to the Nightmare Fan X-Listener video. There's a few people that I'm sure that will know this, but I had too much time to record recently, as I had taken up another job recently. Also, I have my few on those, and I should probably change that real quick. But, yeah. Flour coated my fingertips, and I kneaded my palms into the dough, pressing it and flattening it out onto the counter. I had thought I was 10 minutes ago. When I presented my work to Blue, however, he had insisted that the surface was still too lumpy and not even for me to begin placing the cookie cutters on top. I, on the other hand, wasn't so sure what the loveliness of the cookie dough had to do with the overall results. So as long as there were cookies and they tasted great, I had no complaint whatsoever. Today had been a nice day off for the stress agencies and I. Things between them and the melon mob had cooled down for the time being. Harry had welcomed himself into our house the way he normally does. He and Nick had settled in immediately with the house last I had checked. They were battling it out over a Mario Kart. Embarrassingly, Aaron was destroying ink at the game, playing his Bowser on a motorbike with flames painted on its sides. Pink wailed with every loss, throwing his head back into the he, fittingly enough, was playing as Mario. Something about the choice of their characters struck me with no sense of deja vu, but I shook it off before continuing to follow Blue into the kitchen. I looked over to my armor-clad companion, who was finishing off placing a piece of dough in the shape of a star onto the cookie sheet. He was much further along than I was. And again, I guess it was easier for him to produce so many cookies at once when he could live up to his own standards. How about now? I asked. Gesturing to my flat plane of cookie dough that I had been working on for what felt like forever. Can I start placing cookie cutters now? He peered over at my work with his non-existent nose stuck up into the air. I loved him dearly, but it was undeniable that the magnificent scenes had incredibly high standards. He gave me a kind smile before turning back to his own pile of dough. Why, yes, you may, he said, scooping up another unbaked cookie onto his spatula. I let out a half of air exhale from my chest. I was more than ready to get onto the part that excited me when he asked me to help him with the cookies. I reached over for a heart-shaped cookie cutter that I had been eyeing throughout the whole process. It was so cute. The best part about shapes like stars and hearts was the limitless combinations of icing you could pipe onto them. There were some of the most fun to decorate with sprinkles too. My attention was torn away from my thoughts as Jim entered the kitchen, a book pressed under his arm. He had a reputation for being quite the bookworm, so it didn't surprise me to think that that's how had been spending his day off. Oh, Dream! Blue exclaimed, wiping his gloves onto a hand towel. There you are. What have you been doing? Just rereading a favorite story of mine. I haven't moved an hour and to get my bones moving. Jean giggled, setting the book onto the kitchen counter. Boone promptly placed his hands on his hips. I couldn't help but snicker to myself, knowing that this was about to turn into a teaching moment. As you should be, Blue started. Just because we're taking the day to rest doesn't mean that we should begin to laze about like ink and air with their silly video game. It's healthy to keep the body in motion. I only hope those two don't become one with that couch they've been sitting on for so long. While I know he was well intended, Will sometimes spoke about the others as if he was morally above them. It wasn't brought up so often, considering how we can all tell his scoldings are in our best interests. It didn't stop me from thinking he could afford to take a chill pill every now and again. Jane kept quiet, not responding to Blue's tangent. Looking up at him, I saw that he was watching as we finished cutting out the shape in the dough. Cookies? Yeah, question. What's the occasion? No occasion. Ryan and I just simply needed to do something with our hands. I glanced at Dream, giving him a polite smile. He was already looking at me, and based on the way his head snapped when I met his eyes, he had been orbit as if he was in a trance. Ooh. His hand reached for my face, which caused me to flinch backward to avoid his touch. Oh, my apologies, James said. Dream said. His face was glowing a pastel hue, a nervous chuckle skewing his chest. I had just noticed you had a bit of flour on your cheek, he explained. I relaxed at his explanation, giggling in return. No worries. I was just confused was all. I reassured him. He grabbed the same rag Blue had used to clean his hands, bringing it to my face to brush off the flour that had found its way onto my face. I wasn't definitely sure, but I thought I had caught Blue rolling his eyes at something out of the corner of my eye. Well, let me know when we're ready, Dream said, turning back around and grabbing his book out of the counter. I'd be more than happy to taste test them for you. Blue and I laughed off his remark, watching out of the room. I felt my face become flushed with humiliation at the encounter the two of us just had. I lifted my cookie cutter from the dough before scooping up the now heart-shaped piece of dough onto my own spatula. I turned toward the cookie sheet, placing the heart onto the greased pan. When I turned, I came face to face to Blue. He was staring at me with his hands crossed over his chest. His weight was pushed onto one of his legs, his other arched at an angle. A mocking smirk graced his features as his fingertips tapped against his biceps. What? I asked, cocking my eyebrow at him. Blue only shook his head at me, turning to pick up the cookie sheet into his hands. He laughed in his throat. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it at all. Oh, God. My eyes struggled to open themselves that next morning. Tears I had wept into my pillow had lingered behind my eyelids as I had drifted off to sleep, causing an ugly, crusty substance to cake up between my eyes. Often, sitting up in my bed, I harshly rubbed at them with sleeves of my nightgown. So the color was wiped away from my eyes, a bag of my flesh still hung heavy and unrested on my face, like a soaked towel being hung out to dry, being dragged down toward the earth by water. Those were those effects of my sorrow I knew would take some time to wear off as I went about my day. And to pick it up from the covers, I shifted onto my side, holding my hands by my head and nuzzling myself deeper into my pillow. I didn't have the motivation to get up. What else was I to do? I couldn't leave the bedroom, until one of my kidnapper's minions came to escort me downstairs for breakfast, which wouldn't be for another hour. After a nightmare had whisked me away through the portal last night, he led me up to my room, which was at the top of a long, winding staircase. He placed me in one of the tall towers that I had noticed upon arriving earlier that day to come to rescue Dream. Why he didn't bring me down into the dark, dank depths of the dungeon, I still have yet to understand. Being so afraid of his demeaning disposition, I decided it might be in my best interest to not question his actions. He was being so unusually kind to me, I didn't want to make the mistake of ruining what I had going for me. On our way up, he explained to me that I wouldn't be allowed to leave my room at any point in the day, except for during meals and when I was being guarded by one of the others. Said that this was only for a little bit until they had become accustomed to living here. Though he assured me that it was only in my best interest, the fact that he had me locked into my bedroom suggested he wanted to prevent me from managing to escape until he believed I wouldn't try anything. So much for having my best interest. Then again, I was so confused as to why he would care about what I thought anyway. If anything, I knew I probably shouldn't show up to breakfast in my nightgown, especially since it was still stained in my tears. Maybe I had been aware. Sure, I was aware of the fully stocked wardrobe, so that it was the first place I looked after encouraging myself to leave my bed, despite how incredibly comfortable it was. Opening the doors, I realized how much I had underestimated him when he said fully stocked. There were garments of all different colors and fabrics, ranging from graphic t-shirts to a velvet cocktail dress that it looked like it had been handmade by a highly experienced designer. Huh. I had to admit, I was majorly impressed with all of the options he had provided for me. I pulled out a top and pair of bottoms that fit my taste and style, bringing them into the bathroom with me so I could get dressed. After slipping into my chosen outfit, I walked out into my bedroom and walked across the floor to a full-length body mirror positioned in the furthest corner of the room from my bathroom door. Seeing me in my clothes and my body brought me a feeling of faint euphoria. I was surprised at how uncomfortable they made me feel, and for a second I did a small dance for myself that almost completely distracted me from my situation. The opening of my bedroom door broke me out of my warm thoughts, bringing me back into my misfortunate reality. My head snapped to my right, watching as an unfamiliar figure made their way into the room, leaving the door cracked open behind them. I was greeted by the sight of a skeleton clothed in varying patterns of black and white. He was wearing several layers, which at first glance made me think he was dressed in winter gear. As my eyes focused in on him more, I was able to pull apart the different pieces of his clothing, which looked like a short-sleeved white jacket layered on top of a long-sleeved black t-shirt. He was covered in X motifs from head to toe, giving him the appearance of being bandaged in some places. What stuck out to me was the scar underneath his eye socket. He glowed a vibrant scarlet that only stood out against the rest of his look. It was the pop of color that drew attention to itself, and instantly I stared at him. I had become to believe that the reason I was being treated so well was because I had held some level of importance in their evil schemes. The second that my friends arrived to attempt to rescue me, I would be reminded of the only purpose the villain mob had for me. If they were to succeed in destroying the source, I would no longer have a reason to be here, and I would be horribly discarded anyways. If anyway. This was it was for this reason that I had imagined he had come to drag me down the stairs by arm holding me to follow behind him, as I was a prisoner within the castle walls. This never came to me. Instead, he uncomfortably had held my eye contact, swaying on his heels of his feet. I, I looked off to the side of the corner one of my eyes, then looked back to Alice wasn't in place. Hi? I responded in a weak voice, my words coming out like a shamed whisper. I wasn't entirely sure whether or not this was real. Maybe I was still asleep and I was only dreaming about this incredibly painful encounter. Well, I am, right? He said back, taking his hands away from his behind his back. He nodded, narrowing my eyes at him with curiosity. Cool. Pressed his lips together, awkwardly nodding his head. His head turned to the other side of the room, like he was trying to avoid having to look back at me any longer out of embarrassment. So, food's ready, he mumbled. That's what I'm doing here, to take you to, yeah. I broke out of my stunned state and nodding back at him. Oh, yeah, no problem. I walked over to him, allowing him to lead the way out of the room and down the stairs. Unfortunately for the two of us, the trip down the staircase was rather long, so it was about to become a matter of whether we could make our way down in excruciating silence or attempt to make small talk with one another. Putting myself in his shoes, I figured that the first of the two would be the best option. Given that I was a prisoner here, he likely didn't see me as much of a person. It wasn't worth his time trying to get to know me or be cordial with me. I mean, I'll either be caught or dead with him the next week anyway. So I descended down the staircase behind him in absolute reverence. My name's my name's Ross, by the way. His voice cut clean through the stillness of the air. It's nice to meet you. I felt my fist suddenly ball up at this, accidentally digging my nails into the flesh of my palms of my hands. He actually introduced himself to me, and not in a begrudging manner. I hadn't even asked for his name as I tried to comply with his authority over me. He just willingly told me. And he followed it up by saying it was nice to meet you. It's nice to meet you too, I said, doing my best to give him some semblance of a smile, even though it was utterly authentic. He did his best to smile back at me. The thing about his expression was different from mine, however, because that was that I felt as if his was actually somewhat genuine. It was a grin that was sweet in nature with a hint of sorrow. I remained quiet for the rest of the walk downstairs, pulling apart the moment in the back of my mind, analyzing the seconds as if they were the pieces of code. What reason would a horrible villain have to look at me so kindly? Was he trying to lure me in, insult me with false confidence, lead me to believe there, that there was a side to me that was good, making me blind to the travesties they ran on blending with her? I could have been any of the above. I couldn't bring myself to believe that it was possible that he actually felt pity for me. I'd become so lost in my thought process that when I came back into reality, we were already walking into the dining room. The table was long, stretching. The table was long, stretching across the room as if it had been neatly put into the middle of the floor. Midnight blue table runner was draped across the ebony wooden surface, which had been polished to perfection. Golden thread was embroidered at the end of the cloth, which hung from the table, taking the form of a crescent moon surrounded by other flower-like flourishes. At the table, 7 chairs were placed around its edges at equal distance, except for one of the table's shoulder edges that didn't have a chair in order to draw attention to the opposite end. That was where the largest, most ornate chairs of the chairs sat, undoubtedly reserved for the king who ruled over the castle. 3 of the other 6 that were placed along the table's longer sides were filled by new faces, each which sent of what each which were unnerving and sent a feeling of dread down my spine. They were all bickering with one another over some topic I couldn't make out amongst the buzzing. I felt a hand brush up against mine, and I turned back to see Cross reaching out to me. The right lilac blush dusted his cheeks, and he grimaced at himself. Hey, sorry, I was just trying to guide you to your seat. He explained. The boss was very specific on making sure you were sitting next to him at the table. I wouldn't want you sitting in the wrong spot. He'd rip my skull off. Jesus. I tried to gulp down the knot I had formed in my throat. I only wanted me to sit beside him. Still didn't understand why he wasn't having his henchman bring me a plate of bread and water while I sat behind rusted iron bars, so much as I let them eat at the same dinner table as them. I couldn't wrap my head around the way he was treating me to such fine things. Sure, my room was in an uncomfortably tall tower, but the bedroom itself was rather comfortable in size. It was luxuriously furnished. Something about this didn't sit right with me at all. As I took my seat in the chair next to one at the end, the chatter on the other side of the table, slowed to a stop. I tilted my head upward to give him a nonchalant glance. Like me, three skeletons were all blatantly staring me down in my chair. I cowered in my seat, pushing myself into the back of the chair in an attempt to become smaller. I kept shrinking away. I hoped that maybe I would become so small it would turn invisible, and I wouldn't have to be able to stare at me anymore. Hold on, I gotta check something real quick. That's why. Okay. The chair furthest from me was the greatest giant of a monster I'd ever seen. He made the chair beneath him look tiny in contrast to me, whose head on only just hit the top of mine. There was a jagged-sharp hole in his skull above one of his eye sockets, which it had a red pupil in it that glowed with an ominous dim light. Next to him, a skeleton's hat with a heather-gray hood drawn over his head, which was also wearing a ball cap. His eyes were heterochromatic, with one of his eyes being red, and the other being blue with a thin red line wrapping around its circumference. There was a sickly dullness to his face, as if the color had been drained from his body over the years. Though he was very much alive and sentient, there was not a flicker of life in his dead eyes. I shuddered as I came face to face with the last of the trio, who was sitting directly across from me. I was also familiar with the glowing target-shaped soul that was displayed in front of his chest, and the pooling black mass of liquid that dripped from his eyes down onto his cheeks. I raised my head sheepishly to look at him, careful not to upset him by letting him see that I was staring. To my surprise, he was also looking away, and I wasn't trying to pretend he didn't recognize me. He had picked up a fork that was sitting next to his plate, fiddling with tongs and twirling it around between his fingers like a small baton. His silence on him was agonizing. Shivers were traveling up and down my body. It was a sharp quiet, much like the stillness that a rabbit would notice had befallen the forest around them before being pounced upon by a ravenous fox being teared to shreds after being caught in its sharp, jagged maw. Similarly, I wondered if the three of them had even been made aware of my presence in the castle. Part of me to imagine the thought of slipping from Nightmare's mind, and that the three saw me as an intruder. It would be too late before they began to attack me, and I'd be dead before I even realized what was happening. To my surprise, these expectations immediately fell when one of them finally spoke. Her name is Ryan, right? It was the one furthest away from me, the giant with cracks in his head. His smile spread clean across his face, displaying two rows of splinter teeth that reminded me of wood that had been sent through a wood chipper. Okay. I turned my head in the direction of his skull, avoiding making direct eye contact with the throbbing red eye and notes. I didn't mutter just off yes. He didn't respond. Turning looking back at the surface of the table, when he didn't say anything back, I looked back over at him out of the corner of my eye. Said I did the best I could without calling attention to myself. It appeared he had become slightly less comfortable than he was before. Was it something I had said? No, it couldn't have been. All I did was answer his question. I'd been pretty blunt about it. Did he take my short reply as rude? I found myself becoming intrigued by this idea. Why would he care if I had been rude in the first place? Furthermore, why would he ever bother to ask me about my name? Now that I had dwelled on it, he had been decently friendly without when asking his question as if he genuinely cared about who I was. If I was to assume that I was nothing more than a hostage in a battle between them and my friends, then the most important aspect of my identity is that I am the bait. Shouldn't even be sitting in this chair at this table next to the king's pot at the head of the table in this dining room. My head turned toward him directly now, not giving as much of a care as to whether or not as I could tell I was trying to read him. He looked so important now, as if I had ruined what was supposed to be a nice conversation. The tip of his phalange was tracing patterns onto the wooden tabletop, giving himself entertained in the still quiet of the dining room. To my surprise, I couldn't help but feel a tug in my heart at the situation. If he did want to talk to me, I had totally shut him out. Perhaps that was a bit rude, now that I thought about it. My mouth began to open, my breath leaving my mouth and beginning entering the caverns of my mouth. My heart beat quickened, realizing I didn't even know what I was about to say to him. Regardless of whether I was not ready, a single syllable left my mouth before it was promptly cut off by the opening of the doors I had entered through a moments earlier. As swiftly as it had been opened, my mouth snapped shut at the entity that stalked into the room. His footsteps were calculated and gripping, and he took his time as he moved across the floor, his hands neatly tucked behind his back, his posture stiff and upright, like that of a pretentious school teacher scraping to his pupils. This effect worked perfectly on his subjects, as every head followed him in anticipation as he made his way to his seat, right at the head of the table. Nanger hauled the chair out from under the table, dusted off the cushion about 3 times with the back of his hand, and walked in the space he had recreated between the chair and the table. Suddenly, finally, he sat down, scooting the chair back up to the edge of the table once he was seated. "Good morning, mental gentlemen." His morning greet was curt, yet somewhat sophisticated at the same time. A hooded skeleton in the middle sat in the middle of the trio, under his breath, laughed under his breath, into the inside of his elbow. His eyes shifted to the skeleton on the right, then to Kellen, as if signaling them to follow his lead. In unison, 3 of them turned to him with blank expression on their faces, and their postures sagged. "Good morning, Mr. Nightmare," they all chimed autonomously, before erupting into laughter amongst themselves. Nightmare only rolled his eyes at them, folding his hands in front of himself on top of the table. They looked into his face, not finding a hint of emotion. This kind of tomfoolery must be the norm for the 3 of them, a teasing manner that he had become accustomed to as time drew on. I hadn't realized it, but I feared I was staring at him, because it startled me when Nightmare's eyes, I, I flickered to look back at me. I looked back down at the table, hoping he hadn't noticed me and comfortably observing him and his face. I was led down a mere second later, when I heard a familiar, threateningly deep chuckle emit from his chest. "Good morning, Ian. Did you sleep well last night?" he asked. Now that I had been caught, it wasn't going to hurt me to look up at him once again. When I did, I noticed his eyebrow was cocked at me with interest, and the corner of his lips was curled upward into an aggravating cliché smirk. I only nodded, for I was scoffing on him at the inside. "Wonderful. If you ever find that any of your accommodations aren't to your standard, please do not hesitate to let me know. Your comfort is of utmost priority to me." I still refused to speak back as I redirected my eyes back to the table. I could feel steam billowing up inside me, my chest growing red hot. My comfort was not of it. Excessively soft bedding and pillows fluffed to their seams with feathers couldn't replace the feeling of being safe at home where I belonged. My comfort consisted of my loved one sitting in the living room and binging our favorite movies together, Drew in his favorite chair, exiliating in his sketchpad on the floor in the front of the coffee table, and Lou and I lying across the sofa that with blankets pulled up to our chins. Nothing that nightmare could give me would ever amount to the love and safety they provided me. Despite all this, I didn't dare to make a scene about it, telling him off for putting me in this predicament. It didn't sit right with me at all the way, but something within me gave me the feeling that he already knew. Besides, there was no use in making things worse for myself. I didn't know what Nightmare's temperament was like, and I was not about to risk his favor over me by calling him out for everything he had done. Moments later, a few monster girls in black dresses and white aprons walked into the room carrying silver platters in their arms. Ugh, finally, laughed the skeleton in the hood. If I had a stomach, I would have started eating itself by now. Mind your manners, Dust. Cross-eyed, scowling at him. Dust, or so he was called, found back across from the other side of the table. How about you mind your own business? He spat back at him, his words like venom. They began to bicker amongst themselves. I wasn't paying much attention to them. My mind was trained on all of the servants that had begun flooding into the dining room. There was enough for each of us at the table to have at least one attending to us at the same time, plus some more. I highly doubted that this was the sum of people I ever had working in the castle, but to imagine that this was only a small portion of them left me unaware of the numbers that were too big to picture in my head. I watched as a girl and walked in my direction, being swift and light on her feet, yet remaining so graceful. It was almost as if she was gliding across the wax floor, floating about like a ghost whose soul was trapped within the walls of a haunted mansion. She was covered from head to toe in pale baby pink fur that shone under the dim lights of like silk. The girl had to at least be 6'7". She had she was one of the tallest monsters I've seen in my life. The only way I could be proven wrong is to see what the hulking skeleton at the end of the table looks like when he wasn't sitting down. Looking up at her, I caught her deeper in eyes while she sat down a patter on the table waiting between Nightmare Killer and myself. When she realized I was directly looking up at her, she froze in place as if she wasn't expecting anyone to acknowledge her presence. Out of her best sympathetic smile I could, nodding in the direction. Thank you. She continued to stare at me, just hesitated for a few seconds too long when I started to believe I had actually broken something within her, like a frozen video catching up to speedy with its audio. She quickly backed away from the table, turning around and rushing out the door. My throat tightened as I watched her make her escape. I looked around the table at the others, and wondering if they noticed the interaction, and more importantly, if it had stricken them odd as well. To my surprise, a few of them were loading up the plates with golden pancakes and fluffy eggs, completely oblivious to the girls that had been in the room mere seconds ago. Today is going to be a busy day, said Nightmare, pouring coffee into a mug from a dark brown coffee pot. I expect that the four of you will be ready to receive orders in the conference room right after we finish eating. They all looked up at him as a normal response to their mouth was being full. Nightmare frowned at their lack of respect, but he didn't say another word about it, turning back to his own plate. The food in front of me looked absolutely delicious. Towers of waffles and other cakes dripping with golden maple syrup enticed me with their fragrant smells. But beyond this, I couldn't help myself but feel that my appetite was lacking. My avarice was only aimed at the display itself, and have been come sinking my teeth into moments earlier. Right now, the sweetness of the aroma they gave up seeped into my nostrils and slid down my throat like mucus. And the thought of eating only made me want to throw it right back up. It wasn't even a chance to me consider whether or not it would be recognized that I didn't put anything on my plate. I was quick to call out its current state. Don't be shy, dear. You're welcome to help yourself as much as you like. There's Plenty to go around, he insisted, staring into my eyes as if he was gazing at his reflection in other pointed mirrors. I simply sat my hands down into my lap. "I'm not hungry," was all I could mumble under my breath, afraid of his reaction towards my refusal. "Thank you." I half expected him to be angry with me. He had been far too kind to me thus, especially considering that I was a prisoner. I was being treated with the same hospitality uh, they would a guest of honor. All I could do was sit there and deny it. Not that I put myself at blame for my behavior. I was recently ripped away from the only home I've ever known against my will. I was readily prepared to flinch as he reached to strike me across the face, or yanked me toward him by my hair as he shouted at me for being so ungrateful. Then he would drag me down into the endless, ever-expanding dungeon beneath the ground, communally in his cell, claiming that I would learn to appreciate his mercy by staying down there and learning what it was truly really like to be treated like a captive. His hand never came, nor did the blow of his fist against my cheek. He never tilted his head toward me, looking down at me with expression. Though it was possible that his eyes burrowed a bit deeper. "Why not? Do you feel unwell?" he asked. His palm reached out toward me, pressing the back of his palm for my forehead, almost as if he was very precise of fever. I confronted its question, my eyes darting around the room as if it was a perfect response. Was lurking somewhere in its dark corners. I stuttered. "Yes, I guess so." It was less than untrue, even if I didn't mean it in the way he was asking. I felt absolutely horrible, and I didn't need a high temperature in order to feel that way. "I see," he said. He stood from his chair, walking around behind the chair I was sitting in. He did an incredible amount of teleporting universe jumping yesterday. It's not uncommon for humans to grow ill from constant multiverse travel. I'll take, just reading something. "I'll take you to your room. You need to rest." He held his hand out expectantly. I couldn't take it, however. I was absolutely petrified in my seat, my eyes gaping wide to where I could feel the air seeping into them. I didn't encountered nightmare at all until in the evening last night. That means he knew a lot more about yesterday's events than we were allowed on to believe. If he knew I was in the cask that whole time, when did he begin watching us? Had we failed at sneaking in without us catching his attention, or had he been keeping his eye on us all along? It's not that my trance, the light-headedness I hadn't felt now was dissipating from my mind, and nightmare and I was standing in my bedroom. He pulled away the duvet on my bed, helping me onto the mattress. My forehead was pounding. The events transpiring in front of me were occurring in flashes, like a videotape that had been cut into pieces and then had frames moved before it was put back together. I'll send up one of the help to I'll send up one of the help to come and keep an eye on you until you feel well again. I would stay with you myself, but I have matters to attend with my men. Nightmare said, tucking me in the best he could. Don't be afraid to send for me if there's anything you need. I'll be here all day. With that, he hastily walked out of the room, locking the door behind himself. Staring up at the ceiling of the tower, I felt a cold bead of sweat run down my face with the weight of the gravity running down toward my ears, into the pillow beneath my head. Within the first 2 hours, I was right back where I started my day. The only difference between them and now was my level of awareness to my predicament. I had to get out of here, and I had to get out now. Okay, that was part 5. There's no more parts at the moment, so I will try to keep y'all updated using the new posts. and such. But you can request other parts. You can request any plans and lessons